This is a short video of some ink drawings and woodcut prints inspired by my walks along the Rio Grande Trail and the Roaring Fork River, which are near my studio at the Airport Business Center. This walk will start at the river near the airport and end at the top of Independence Pass. I carry a small Strathmore sketchbook, upstairs Carl's Pharmacy, and chisel point black and silver Sharpie markers. The black and silver markers are a good substitute for the black and dirty blue I use in my prints. So why draw outside? Why not work from photographs? For me, it has a lot to do with integrity and trying to see the landscape more abstractly. Edward Abbey wrote in the introduction to Desert Solitaire, "In recording my impressions of the natural scene, I have striven above all for accuracy, since I believe that there is a kind of poetry, even a kind of truth in simple fact. I too want to be accurate and faithful to the landscape." Aspen's environment is great for woodcut printmaking. It's full of contrasts, bright sun and dark shadows, 4 distinct seasons, the sharp edges and angles of a landscape that was both uplifted and then carved by glaciers. Peaks and ridges, U-shaped valleys, the raw scraped granite of the grottos, endless scree fields and rock glaciers, all contrasting by canyons full of white water. And the river is full of erratics, giant granitic boulders brought down the pass by the glaciers. And there's snow, which contrasts with everything. Woodcut is a very restrictive art form, and I find real freedom in the lack of choices. The characteristics of woodcut are simple, blocky, flat areas, often clumsy, kind of primitive. And the lack of color, the truth is, I'm afraid of color, so I don't think much about it. Working in black and dirty blue keeps the images more abstract, less literal, less illustrative, maybe more formal. The technique of woodcut is more like sculpture than painting. It's reductive. The artist starts with solid black and has to dig out the image. Straight lines and simple shapes are best. The blocks are cut and chiseled in the mirror image of the final print. So after all that time-consuming work, finally inking and seeing the first proofs is always a surprise. We've traveled about 8 miles from the ABC, past some Whitewater, past Red and Gold Butte, and Shadow Mountain, and we're at Difficult Creek Trail. After the wilderness boundary sign and up a little rise, the trail is covered with windfall aspen, a wildly abstract landscape. Herbert Beyer made a series of beautiful drawings and paintings based, I suspect, on this spot. Heading up the pass through the Narrows, and the next sharp left turn is mile marker 49. This was the river in June of last year at high water. White water against black rock and stark vegetation. This is a large print, 30 by 20 inches. A little further is Weller Lake Trailhead. The lake was high, and the beautiful, complex log jam at the far end of the lake has always gotten my attention. This was a real challenge to try and show reflected light and the logs that are both on the surface and underwater. A very graphic combination of angles. Now we're at the top of the pass. This was the last day it was opened, the last Sunday in October. First snow, the wind was blowing from the north, and it was cold. So I did this little drawing of Mountain Boy out of the wind behind the outhouse. And it seems like a good example to show my technique of making a woodcut. First, 1/2-inch birch plywood, 2 blocks, 24 inches square. One will be the black block, the other will be the blue block. The image area is going to be 21 by 14 inches with room left for registration marks and a sheet of 20 by 25 inch paper. I'm going to cut that 21 by 14 inch window out of the blocks. I have to give myself a generous border around the edge so that the ink doesn't get picked up outside the print area. I stained the block with some pastel acrylic paint from Walmart. It's 50 cents for a little tube, and they come in all these beautiful pastel colors. There's something deeply satisfying about staining the wood, and you'll see the reason for this in a moment. The preparation of the print. That's the scanned enlargement from the original, which is the corner, printed on my inkjet printer. That's the black transfer. And now I'm transferring the image to the block, and it's been printed on oven paper, the kind of paper you use to bake cookies. It's an interesting material. It's semi-transparent and it accepts water-based ink. It also doesn't dry, so you can transfer to another surface, in this case to my prepared block. I'm using a Stanley box knife. I love the feel of pulling a sharp knife and pushing a sharp chisel through the wood. Remove all the purple, and that pre-cut with the box knife gives me a nice crisp edge. This is a good example of what the block looks like inked. Just the flat, untouched surface gets the ink. This is the blue block, and I want to show the grain, so I'm vigorously scraping away with the wire brush. And birch has a beautiful grain, and that's somewhat how it'll look once it's inked. And now this shows the registration system. The plexiglass sheet represents the paper, and the little green squares I'm putting on the blue block are for positioning the paper. You need to be able to have the paper hit the sweet spot on both the black and blue block. The ink is oil-based, and I'm working on a sheet of tempered plate glass. You need a really flat surface to roll out the ink. Usually I don't have both colors on at the same time, but in this case we're proofing this print. This block is a black block, but I'm running a double hit of the blue in the sky, and the design allowed for that space between the black and blue, so you'll see in the final print the results. Now a 20 by 25 inch piece of rice paper. It's thin, transparent paper and very rugged. You have to take the air and the creases out with a small Japanese baren. Now the blanket, which traditionally is wool, but in this case is a yoga mat. A cut-up yoga mat from Lululemon. And this is my new press, which has really helped in my consistency, and it's courtesy of the fellowship. So this is the first run, the black block, and I'll set it aside to dry. And now the blue block is being inked for the first time, and the trick here is just enough ink and just enough pressure. And too much pressure and the grain will be lost, and too much ink and the grain will be lost. Again, the Baron, take out the air and make sure there are no creases after the paper and block go through the press. So now here's the small drawing that inspired the print. And now a close-up of the grain, and you can see two things. The blue, semi-transparent blue over the black creates a new sort of a dirty dark gray, and the grain is running over the first hit of blue in the sky. So there's a two-tone sky and two-tone mountain. This is the small press. It comes from England. It's made by the Portable Press Company. And my long studio table and some prints on the wall. And there's the evolution of this print, from the small drawing to the scan to the print. This is a view of Pyramid Peak from Truscott, from the golf course. And it's a large print. It's 30 by 20 inches. I think it represents that abstract quality I so look for. There's so many steps involved, and the intensity of one part of the process to the next makes me forget about the previous step. So when I'm in the stage of preparing the blocks, I've forgotten about the drawing. And when I'm in the stage of cutting the blocks, I've forgotten about the preparation. And when I'm in the stage of inking the blocks, I've forgotten about cutting the blocks. And when finally I've done proofing and I'm looking at the print, it's at that moment that I realize what I've done. I might have captured what the intent of the original drawing was, a response to the undeniably beautiful abstract qualities of this spectacular landscape. My thanks to the Aspen Art Museum and Teresa Booth Brown, and to my fellow artists, Lauren, Marilyn, and Teal, for the honor of spending a stimulating 9 months with them in conversation and in sharing their work. Thank you.